battle and continue forward. Revolution. Radio! The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and FreedomSlips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, FreedomSlips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Rebecca Jernigan, your tour guide into discoveries, coming to you live from the heart of America to around the globe via the World Wide Web, satellite, and podcast. Let's journey together into the realms of the known to the unknown in search of enlightenment, knowledge, and truth.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are on this beautiful planet Earth and known as Talenthal by some of the Lemurians. This is your host, Tobias B. Harrell, and you're listening to Journeys with Rebecca right here on wolfspiritradio.com and being simulcast every week on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com Studio B. I look forward to your feedback and participation tonight. If you have any questions for my guest or myself, please put them in all capital letters in the chat room so that they're easier to see, and we will do our best to answer some of them as time permits in the second hour. Besides welcoming all of you tonight, I would also like to welcome my friend and producer, JP. How are you tonight, JP?
Hello there. How are you doing?
Not too bad. You're expecting me mentioning your name because you're used to it, so you got your finger on the trigger, I see.
I've just built this box, which allows me to be very rapid and very firm. It's like I built this box so that I could demute myself very quickly, and it's built using a amusement arcade, the buttons that you hammer and hammer and hammer and hammer and hammer. You know, it's built using one of those buttons, so it's built for punishment. So there you go. That's how I got there so quick.
Well, the more time goes on, the more experience you have, you come up with these fantastic tricks that keep you on the ball, right?
I've been obsessing with making this thing. You know, it turns me into a horrible person, really.
Now I want a picture of it. You'll have to share a picture of it sometime.
I got it on Facebook. I've been building it, quite publicly, and it uses, I don't want to take up too much of, your space, but, your lovely guest as well. It uses relay logic to determine whether I'm on air or, whether Mike's live or not. It's just a thing.
Well, it sounds really cool, but you've already lost me when you're talking about relay logic. I know little bits of logic here and there. You might even get displays of that during the show sometime. Logic.
You see, what it is most logic is done using TTL electronics. This is like relays. Like, the things that you have in your car when you energize your like solenoids and things like that. So it's kind of really old school.
Well, that sounds very cool. I look forward to seeing a picture of that. I'll check it out on your Facebook. I would thank you, JP. I would just
thank you, bless you. And I'll step back.
Okay, I'd like to remind everybody that both Revolution Radio and Wolf Spirit Radio are listener supported, and I really urge you to give them a donation because, of course, as you know, every donation really helps those like JP who do work so hard behind the scenes. But without further ado, Tonight, my guest is Jane Bernard. Jane is a visionary and a teacher who's passionate about the role of sensual thinking to facilitate enduring positive change in our world, and has been described as logical and original, as well as inspiring and provocative. It is said that through her eyes, we see ourselves differently. I'm going to actually be telling you quite a bit about Jane before I welcome her tonight, because I want to give you some good background on all of this so we can just dive head forward into talking about it. Jane is a writer and the author of 3 books about intuitive thinking. She has been on TV and international radio talking from the intuitive perspective. Jane introduced her first book, called Fine Tuning, on the Montel Williams Show in 2006. Her easygoing combination of common sense and originality is a natural eye-opener. Her background includes working with autistic and learning challenged children, educational think tanks, a writing professor, a regular on national radio, technical writer, and coaching people to be intuitive eaters. People have been connecting with their senses to take control of eating habits with her helpful book about intuitive eating titled Am I Really Hungry? Since 2011. In her latest book, Lucid Living in the Virtual Age, Jane says that it is time to come to our senses, and that our natural capacity to make a difference comes uniquely from within us and is updated and balanced constantly by what we sense. Using your sensuality, Jane explains, takes life to another dimension. You can use your organic sensual thinking to naturally sync with change, update options, and balance stress. Lucid Living in the Virtual Age presents a way of thinking differently to bring easy resilience and confidence by using inborn intuitive skills that naturally organize, transform, and inspire self-expression and communication. Jane says you can rewire your thinking with cellular tools to rely on a sense of balance, values, and personal priorities, which then become real portals to lucid living and happiness. Jane will also talk about the fact that ultimately we know much more than we realize, and that when we check in with reality, real reality is actually more intense than virtual reality. I think this is going to be an intensely interesting conversation that we can all relate to. Jane Bernard, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for that beautiful introduction. I feel my age. I mean, how could you do all of those things if you were 21, right?
Well, that's just part of it, isn't it? You know, I mean, I know you talk about thinking with your senses and feeling with your mind. Is this different than what most of us do naturally?
No, this is something we all do naturally. We're just not aware of it. And that's why it's so cool, because as soon as you realize that you're doing it, you can use it to your advantage. We think
right,
with senses all the time. You know, that's how we connect with reality. If you weren't using your ears right now, you wouldn't know you were talking to me, because your brain can't get any messages without your ears.
That's interesting. Yeah, so you can get awareness through your senses, but you're not always aware of them. Is that right?
Well, you get awareness through your senses, but because we take our senses for granted, we often ignore them, and that's why we make mistakes or poor judgment. And the fact is, we get much more through our senses when we use all 6 senses, because we sense things like honesty, we sense kindness, we sense danger, we sense if we can trust someone, we sense opportunities. But when we don't acknowledge what we sense, we don't get it. It's like you can close your eyes if you don't want to see, and you can shut your ears down. Well, we've been culturally programmed to ignore our intuition. But it's what I think that sensual thinking, sorry to interrupt you, is what makes us uniquely human.
Well, it's interesting because, I mean, even in the introduction, we're talking about your book regarding food and listening to your body. And it's kind of, it's certainly it's on par with what we're talking about now, because we really have to become more aware of our senses and how they work, so that these things that do shut us down, obviously, don't keep shutting us down, right?
Right. And, you know, the reason why I like to talk about food, besides that I love to eat, I love delicious food, is that we can actually train our brain by how we eat. Because the thing about eating is it's part of our survival instinct. and so is intuition. So the way we eat impacts the way we think, and vice versa. But the reason why I like to talk about eating is it's the second most sensual thing that we do, and anybody can talk about it. And when we eat with awareness not only of our five senses, like we really taste the food and savor it and chew it and enjoy it, but if we also eat with curiosity about, like, what am I eating? Or dignity, how does this feel to me? Then we're using our sixth sense, because you can't think curiosity. It's an intuitive tool. It's something you feel. Curiosity essentially is an open mind. It's being open to the unexpected. And you can't think that. And you can't think dignity either. But with eating, not only as humans, not only do we eat like because we're hungry and we need to eat so we don't die, but we satisfy social hunger and emotional hunger also when we eat. And the way that we do it most successfully is when we have eye contact with someone we're eating with, when we really enjoy and savor our food. Two things happen. First of all, when you really enjoy your food, in fact, did you know you get more nourishment from it? The reason why is because when we eat really fast or we don't really taste our food, our body gets a signal that we're in a flight mode, that there's something dangerous, or else that the food is poisonous and that we need nourishment, but we don't need to draw it out. Yes, mindful eating. Thank you, JP. So what it is when we chew our food, first of all, it releases digestive enzymes that are in our mouth, and it gets the digestive process started. It actually, in fact, physically for all of us, takes 15 minutes before our brain knows that any food is in our stomach. So by chewing our food and really tasting and savoring the flavor, we relax our body so it says, hey, something good is happening. I'm going to take as much out of this as I can. I'm going to absorb it. I'm going to really love it. And so what you eat when you enjoy your food and you savor it, you get much more nourishment from physically. Also, when you take your time and you savor your food and you eat a little slower, you probably eat less because you'll realize you're full. Whereas when we eat really quickly and we don't even notice we've eaten, in our mind, we're still hungry. And we don't feel satisfied. It's just a physical fact. And another thing is that when you're eating and you're talking to someone and you're enjoying it and you're having eye contact and you're sharing ideas or you're sharing what's on your mind, you relax your whole body physically. And you open yourself to be sensual in many ways. And some of them are just in terms of getting spiritual nourishment from the person you're with. Because we actually communicate with energy all the time. But when we don't notice it, we don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. So many like spiritual nourishment through different psychic levels, right? Different information streams.
Right, but the thing is, children are totally tuned into it because they aren't taught to ignore their intuition.
Right.
So all of us, men and women, have intuition. It's just part of our survival instinct. A lot of times people say, women have it, but men don't. Actually, everyone has it, and I think it's just becoming more of a social phenomena that people are talking about and embracing because we're entering a new humanitarian age where we're starting to think more with both sides of our brain, and we're actually starting to embrace the gentle power of intuition, because we're leaving an age of yeah.
Go
ahead. I'm sorry.
Go ahead. I was just going to say so many levels to it, because we're talking intuition on different levels. And then when we're discussing food, it's food instinct. I mean, the fact that our body craves certain things, to become aware that those are actually intelligent signals telling us in most cases that our body is telling us what we actually need, is a huge leap for a lot of people, because in so much context, people think of cravings as negative things. Oh, I was craving chocolate, or I was craving that soda. But if we can flip it on the other side, like you're talking about, Jane, it's an incredibly intuitive and natural phenomenon that is instinctive within our system for our survival.
Well, thank you. And you know how I came to this is when I wrote a book called Am I Really Hungry that you mentioned, I studied diet books because I had never dieted. And I sat on the floor of Barnes & Noble for a week. I read 250 diet books. I noticed some horrifying things about the diet consciousness. Basically, they never explain to you how to know when you're hungry. And they never explained how to know when you're satisfied. So those are only the two basic things about eating that impact my thinking. And what happened is that people in our world, it's really not just the diet either. It's really like the whole consciousness of the last century. We sort of cut ourselves off from the neck down and glorified the intellectual mind as if it was the be all and end all. But we're actually one cohesive system. We are amazing beings. We have so much power within us and between us. And when we get together and share ideas or share joy or just share goals, we are so powerful. It's phenomenal.
So there's signals coming from all over the place, isn't there? Even as you're talking about food, then we talk about being in groups of people and communicating with other people. There are signals seen and unseen, heard and unheard. And tell us more about the different signals and how the awareness is so important.
Well, I will, but I'm going to first get back to the food because I realize that I jump all over the place. So what happens is, the reason why I write about eating, back to that, is when I worked with dieters, to teach them how to essentially lose weight by intuitive eating for this book, because I don't really think it's a good goal to lose weight. I made the goal just to eat healthy and to feel good. And I taught them how to use intuitive tools. And what happened is yes, there was gradual weight loss as long as people really wanted to lose weight. But what really happened is that people's lives changed, because when they started eating with dignity and when they started making prudent choices, prudence means like comparison shopping, like I like this or I don't like this, like a pair of jeans, for example. Does it fit me? Does it not? That kind of thing. When they started doing this, they started using those same tools without realizing it in all of their relationships. And life got bigger for people because the way we can train our brain effortlessly by eating intuitively. Because of the fact that eating is part of our survival instinct, it has a high rating in our brain. So, for example, if one of us, if we just eat really fast and don't really pay much attention to what we're eating, we could have a mental pattern of making choices without knowing all the details.
Wow.
Or if we just eat whatever's put in front of us and we don't discriminate how our body's feeling, we may put ourselves into relationships where we're really accepting much less than we deserve. So everything is connected.
Yeah, it's amazing when you put it that way, because we're talking about this biological computer that in so many cases, unless we're aware of the things that you're talking about, it's not functioning in the full way, right?
No, we are so powerful as individuals and so complete within ourselves, but because we are, especially adults have been taught and programmed so long not to respect themselves below the neck, We have a lot of problems, from loneliness to obesity, that really don't need to exist. And of course, no one wants them to.
It's interesting in my practices. I work with people on different levels with the conscious and subconscious minds. And on so many levels, people come to me and they say, what can I do to see things more like you do, Tobias, or to do some of the things that you do? And the first thing I always say is health. I say health. We have to become healthy, not just of the mind and the spirit, but we have to be healthy physically, so that we have literally the nourishment and the chemicals and the organics and different things within our system that facilitate this health of the mind and spirit and higher thinking. Just as you're talking about, Jane, I think it's fantastic. It's so very important. Yeah.
Well, I think mental, social, and spiritual health are equally part of daily happiness.
Yeah.
And the thing is, it's really, but the other thing I think is that it's very hard to tell people, like, you're open, you're resilient, you have a unique ability to transcend your initial cultural dogma to be your own thinker. But a lot of people have trouble with that. And that's why eating with your clients, even if you just say, well, just start in a small way, just choose only to eat for health. Only to eat for health. Something simple, because that way their brain is left, the intellect is left out of it, the ego is out of it. You can't train your mind with your mind, but you can train your mind by how you eat, because it's a physical thing. And what excites us, what changes us, what moves the world is passion and sensuality. And we're passionate about life. We're passionate about health. And when we're having a great meal, we're passionate about that.
Yeah. Absolutely. It's interesting because on one end of the scale, we're obviously and fully talking about becoming more aware, opening up the awareness through the health and the facilities that we do have. And on the other end of the scale, in so many cases, there's an overstimulation by this excess of information on the internet and all of these different things. So that's why I think it's just so, that's why I love talking with people like you, because we can sort of fine tune these things and get out of that flow of overstimulation where there's so much information we don't even know what to believe or latch on to.
Right. And that's such a good point, because what I find is, I call these the intuitive tools that I guide people to use in my writing, and they're just global and iconic. And I believe that that's what's wonderful, is we can manifest them physically, and someone from Iceland would know what we were saying, even if they didn't know the words. But the thing about understand intuition, I believe, is that it helps us understand how things come together. When you use your intuitive tools when you eat, all of a sudden, healthy boundaries become clearer. And when we understand boundaries, we're much safer, and we have more security in our thinking. And that's really the important thing, is boundaries. That because there's such an overload of information, people's boundaries are being bombarded, and they're permeable. So if you decide that you're going to only to respond to something that feels dignified, or you're only going to do something after you realize what the impact's going to be, which is use foresight, like even when you cross the street, if you look both ways before crossing, that's called foresight. You look both ways to make sure you're not going to get hit by a car. Well, in everything we do, we need to look both ways. So these simple intuitive tools, curiosity, courage, dignity, determination, tenacity, prudence, they sound really simple, but when they become part of your cellular thought process just by eating, then they become part of your cellular thought process whenever something hits you in the face. And we're being hit in the face all the time.
Absolutely.
Yeah, reality's always changing, but the things that I'm talking about, like dignity and curiosity, are always relevant.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that our sensuality is stronger than stress.
Mm.
You know, I that's one of the biggest problems that I see when I talk to people is this question about stress.
Mm-hmm.
And stress is really a lockdown. It's a rut, isn't it? I mean,
it's interesting because I often talk with people about the same subjects, and I sometimes explain to them in my sort of verbiage, I say that stress and fear are actually energies that consume the energies of passion and intuition. And they really are, as far as I can see it, that they literally will consume in creative energies.
Uh-huh. So I don't see it that way. I think that I think that they're bullies, and I think that any bully will give you the illusion that he or she can consume you. So I think you're absolutely right. But the thing about bullies is that they're all cowards. And so the thing about stress and fear really is that we can, when you are really stressed, for example, I'm just going to keep going back to eating because we've agreed that's a good topic.
Yes.
If you're really stressed and you sit down, even just with a cup of coffee and that you like, if you like to drink coffee, whatever you like to drink, and you smell it and you feel the warmth of it and you really taste it, doing that absolutely liberates your mind from stress, because when you take a moment to fine-tune your senses, your 5 senses, that is what reconnects you with your inner voice, your intuition. And when you connect with that, that's when the bullies seem to be pushed back. And while what you're going through is certainly real, your own sense of self, your ability to see a bigger picture comes back into focus.
Yeah. I think it's really interesting. I'm making a correlation between even nutrients in our bodies and the effect that stress has on those, because it literally, I think, will burn the good things in our body more, these different types of emotions, right? So it's literally a matter of energy balance.
Yes.
I think that's fascinating.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
You were talking
the thing about energy, since you mentioned it, that is interesting, is that we know that emotions don't always guide best decisions. And I think the reason why is because all emotional thinking is a response to conditioning or habits. An emotion is always a response to something, but the difference between sensual thinking with your senses, is that everything you sense syncs with the present to relax your mind and guide decisions that fulfill self-identity and personal purpose. Whereas emotions, they're always a reaction. So they're always based on the past. If you are stuck in the past, that's when the stress can be powerful. But the reality is we can only be in the present. And the way we pull ourselves out of that fear zone is by connecting with sensuality. That's one reason I think people turn to drugs. Because they say, I'm going to get high. Well, what's getting high? High is getting in touch with life. Now, of course, we know it's an illusion if you're using drugs. However, food is like a drug. I mean, sunlight is a drug. Good conversation can be a drug. Making love can be a drug. What is a drug?
Ice water. Ice water is my drug.
Ice water is your drug? Ah! All right.
It's so
funny.
true. I mean, I love what you talk about there and what you were saying, because central thinking, you said, syncs with the present. It synchronizes with the present, and emotions are basically, you said, programs from the past. And it's so true.
Yes.
So, I mean, people talk about, oh, come on, live in the moment and stop harboring on the past. And, the past is behind you. And it's absolutely true. Something that Elsie, you were mentioning just a few minutes ago was about boundaries of thinking. And I understand from what you explained to us that boundaries are not the same as limitations, because realizing boundaries really means that you're realizing what is interfering with free thinking. Is that right?
That's a really good question. Boundaries are definitely not the same as limitations. I'm not really sure what you mean by limitations, but what I mean by boundaries are something we sense that is a vibration. For example, you can be with someone and talking, and you go to a subject, and if you're tuned in, if you're watching their eyes or you feel their energy, you can notice that a topic that you've touched on is making them uncomfortable. So that's a kind of boundary, but it's not a limitation. Part of respecting ourselves is to respect others. Part of sensuality is to share the experience of merging and growing together. We all, I feel like humanity is like water. The water comes from everywhere. It comes from the top of mountains, and there's these little tiny drips, or these big streams, or little puddles here and there. And, water comes together and it goes apart. Actually, it evaporates and goes up and rains down on us. But with people too, there are natural boundaries in every relationship. Even if you're madly in love with someone and her in-breath is your out-breath, it doesn't mean that she is not a complete entity unto herself as you are. And then when the two of you do merge and do have what's called a meeting of the mind or a blending of the spirit, there is so much trust that it takes to do that. And the foundation of trust is mutual respect. And mutual respect is a kind of boundary awareness, not a limitation. What do you mean by a limitation, Tobias?
Well, in so many cases, people, when they think of boundaries, they're thinking about protecting themselves, And if you're putting up walls, and that's the type of boundary I was suggesting there. Because again, that's sort of what people often think of when they think of boundaries.
Well, we do have to protect ourselves. I think that's absolutely true, but it's not a negative thing. And I guess that was the energy that I was getting in, that's why I asked you what you were talking about. Like when you say limitations, I feel a negative, something's negative that limits, because to me, sensuality, because it's always changing constantly, it's always embracing change. I don't think there are limitations, but there are boundaries, and we always have to protect ourselves. That's part of our intuition. That's part of our survival instinct. But to protect yourself is to honor yourself. And you deserve that. All life deserves that. We all, it's time for such a wonderful reboot in the world consciousness right now. It's such a beautiful awakening that's happening. We're coming out of the industrial age, and then we're coming from the psychological age or of the 21st century. Very wonderful, important steps in human evolution, but we're coming into a time where there are no boundaries that are so negative. For example, like the internet. I love the internet, even tonight, the way we're talking, because it breaks down cultural, social, religious, ageist, every kind of boundary that exists in the past does not exist on the internet. That doesn't mean we don't have to navigate it and that we have to be wise, but it means that we can connect without rigidity. the industrial age, had such a love of machinery that it started turning people into machines, and they were factory workers, and they just, even today we have people who do things that are so mindless that they get bored or their brains get dumbed down because they're just mimicking a machine. Mm-hmm. And then in the 20th century, there was this huge emphasis really on Freudian psychology, and greed and sex were like the two topics. And there's so much emphasis on psychology that people became consumed with the mind. Mm-hmm. But we are now, because we are, even the fact that you and I are talking in this topic, and when I hear what you have to say and the wonderful work that you're doing and the kinds of awareness that you're raising, think of how many people are ready for this, because mm-hmm. everyone is ready to break down the superficial boundaries that don't serve them to bring out their highest potential. And we are born to be our highest potential. We are born to evolve. We are just like a flower. Flowers, you put a seed in the ground and it's just disgusting. It's in dirt. It has to break out of the, the sides of the flower. There's a film like skin on it, and then it has to work its way surrounded by bugs and worms and God knows what, and it comes up and then it gets stepped on or peed on or anything could happen, and it has to keep growing. But we're just flowers too. We're part of nature, and all of us are here to evolve and grow, and the boundaries of rigidity that existed before are fading away, and we're coming, I believe, to an age where we need to think differently so we can find new solutions for old problems. I believe there's a much bigger trend everywhere when people are so interested in connecting on an energy level. They don't need to have intellectual limits to communicate. And, I respect the mind, but I don't respect the mind more than I respect the heart. I respect the body and the mind and the soul. And I think that we're learning that we are holistic, and the disease in the world and the obesity in the world are just symptoms of how people have, inadvertently disconnected from their very own bodies, which are the home of their soul.
Yes.
And it's so interesting because we can be brain dead and still be alive. But if your heart dies, you're over.
Right.
So that has to say something.
I've heard so many people, in my travels that have said certain phrases like, oh, my eyes are wide open, or oh, I'm completely aware. And the very sad reality is, in some cases, there's so much, as you were just alluding to there, they aren't aware. They aren't aware of the senses that are natural to them. They're not aware of progress even being a necessity. Change is progress. Progress is change. One of the things that people often fear is change, right? We're taught to fear change. But that's changing thanks also to the internet, because we have updates all the time. So there's a whole new consciousness. Oh, an update? Okay. Oh, we do it a different way? Okay. There's a very big flexibility factor in the younger generation, or anybody who's willing to embrace technology. I mean, even JP was like going on with his new box. Yeah.
I'm sure. I mean, that was fascinating, even if I didn't understand the whole conversation. I knew it was about something that made life better, and that he was using a new concept, and that he was willing to try it. And, what can we ask for?
Because that is a part of the creativity. The creativity and the passion is a part of that change. It's the part of the progress in so many ways. I see people saying, well, what is there to change? I love this world. It's so perfect the way it is. I think that can be a very unhealthy thing, because it usually stems from a lack of awareness.
Well, I don't know. I find I know very little. And, it's almost a relief to realize how little I know. Because that gives me such freedom to question things. It gives me such freedom to try things that I've never done before. So I love life. And you know, I think that it's okay if someone thinks that, you know, for a minute has a sense of control, but it's always a total myth.
Yes.
I mean, there's no such, there just isn't any such thing. And the only kind of control is really the commitment to be right there, right now, and do the right thing the right way for the right reason and honor yourself. Because if you honor yourself, A, you will attract people to you who treat you with honor. And B, you will find people and find opportunities that support your inner being. I mean, every person alive, I believe, is born with a purpose. And your purpose can be to make the best apple pie in the world. It could be to be the top cab driver. It doesn't matter what your purpose is. It's that it's yours. And as long as you do what really excites you and is a good thing, then I believe that this helps you keep your mind open to change. Because the thing about intuition, it connects you with your sense of purpose by showing the bigger picture. Maybe these people you're talking about are really in a very narrow space.
Yeah, yeah. Honestly, sometimes I wish that my purpose in life was to have the ability to cook food like a pie without burning it.
Well, that's a goal then.
So something that you said a moment ago, you said that you realize that you know so few things. And that is such a freedom because that gives you so much to look forward to, doesn't it?
Yeah, yes, it does. It makes me have fun because when you don't know much, I mean, I know where I have to be at 3:00 or something like that, but when I really realize how little I know, I feel more playful. I have fun and I laugh a lot and I find that, I stumble upon amazing things. I just do. I think it's very liberating, not to know things, but I think you have to. And I think that part of the whole upgrade of technology is helping people loosen up their minds. I just think it's harder for some people who have always found so much security in knowing that north is north and south is south. You know, that they haven't ever been in a position where they've had the luxury maybe of just letting go.
Yes.
And just leaving the familiar for a while.
I sometimes tease some of my friends because they are such as you just described. They're, oh no, please tell me what time and where and when and what will we do? And I say, you know, I can't even function when they start asking those questions because my only response can be, let's go with the flow. I don't know, we will figure it out in real time, right? And as for my understanding and in already so many of the things that you've described and talked about tonight, sensuality really is real-time intelligence, isn't it?
Oh, it is. It's how we spontaneously collaborate, communicate, and create our lives.
Yeah.
And you know, it's really fun. I mean, one of the ways I sometimes describe sensual thinking is thinking with your senses and feeling with your mind. And it's so interesting. I can do that when I'm talking to artists.
Yes.
Because creative people are very sensual. And, when I say thinking with your senses, they immediately get it because they see or they hear or a texture just talks to them. And the only thing sometimes I have to explain is feeling with your mind. But we feel so much with our mind. And even, you know, for the people who are the map lovers, like, they probably have a great natural sense of direction. Personally, I do not. I depend on Google Maps when I get lost. But the thing is that you can sense direction because, as you said, it's spontaneous. Its sensuality is always right spontaneously with you. And whatever was happening 5 minutes ago is not happening now.
Right. Right. So sensuality is like a wavelength. It's like smelling a color or seeing the dance of a sound. There's just more dimension. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love talking about wavelengths because like right now we're hearing each other through sound waves. We can't see them, but we know about them. Imagine that we're hearing waves. Pretty weird, huh?
Well,
and
it is.
Yeah.
It's a great experience. And then to think about the things, there's one thing that you just said is we can't really see it. Then there's all of these other sort of levels of this consciousness. There's different connections, psychic connections, different emotional connections, different, passion and all of the things that we connect to on the same topics. Those are all different connections. And the more they stack up, the more abundant the experience becomes, isn't it?
Yes, it's the great ocean of life, right?
Yeah. So where do you take people when they look at you? It must happen. Sometimes people must look at you and say, Jane, I don't get it. I just, how can you help me, fix me, tell me more. I mean, I just don't get what I'm supposed to do.
Well, I don't get what I'm supposed to do. That's such a good question. I find often when people say that is that they either don't know what they are supposed to do or they don't want to do it. And one of the most important things to be an intuitive thinker is to be honest with yourself. Because if you're not deeply honest with yourself, you actually can't be honest in anything in your life, and that really makes it tough.
Mm-hmm.
And, from a totally different perspective, because I love the way we're talking, we're sort of like a giant dandelion with a million different seeds on us blowing in the wind. Sometimes I'll meet someone and, they just will say, I don't get it. And you know what? That's fine. Because everybody is not going to get it. It's new. This is a new way of thinking. It's it's ancient as time. I know you know that, and I know that. And a lot of people listening tonight know, of course, centuries ago, hundreds, thousands of years ago, people knew this. But the fact is for today, it's new. It's a new way of thinking. And if it's too overwhelming to ask a person to open their mind to realize what they sense, that's fine. Because everyone cannot move forward. And I think instead of trying to change people who really don't get it, I think the point is to be true to yourself and connect with people who do get it. And the more people who get it, it swells the whole consciousness all around them. And the whole world will tilt. Because there's so many good people in this world who are not being heard from, but who have beautiful voices. And there's so many kind people in this world who are there to help others who don't really have as much of an opportunity to meet others like themselves. So people who are good and kind and feel confident that if they focus on energy that is full of integrity and justice and morality and love, will discover other people who do. And people who don't get it, God bless them, let them go, because they will, as the masses pick up and more people get it, they will come in. Because a lot of times when people can't get things, it's because they're afraid. And that fear is because they don't trust themselves.
Yes.
That's the only person you really have to trust.
Yes. Yeah.
You hear my New York sound.
Yeah, it sounds fantastic. It sounds very New York right now. So, it's really nice what you're talking about, because it reminds me that, sometimes any of us, we don't learn well unless we can learn by example. So if we don't get something and it's put in front of us, or it's in our environment, or it's the way one of our friends is, or a loved one, then we see it more clearly sometimes, and then we have a conscious choice of awareness, or an aware choice of consciousness. Yeah.
Then we have a leader. But it's not only, by example, we learn by experience. That's why eating intuitively is the stealth way to open your mind. It's a stealth way to train your brain. And when you eat intuitively, you totally connect with your body. And so you become much healthier automatically. And you become, because you're eating with dignity, and you're curious about what you're eating, and you're making choices based on what's really important to you. You teach your mind you automatically, it's just amazing. We automatically train our brain that way. So people who have been brought up with rigid diets and rigid rules, and it creates fear.
Yes. So we have all of these different types of doorways to awareness and consciousness, don't we?
We do. We have so many opportunities in front of us 24/7 that it would just make you giggle silly if you knew it.
It's fascinating to think, because so many times people say, well, I don't know what to do to rebuild the pathways in my mind and awareness. I don't know what to do, but that's what a doorway is, right?
Oh, that's right. But sometimes a doorway is just something that gives you a pause, or it's just something that gives you an insight. I think that doors are like a metaphor for an opening. Mm-hmm. And I have a friend who wrote to me last night that she sent me an email. I'm so frustrated. She's a photographer, and she's a great photographer, and she wrote, I just don't know what project to work on next. I don't know what to do. I have, and I'm thinking, holy mackerel, how amazing. So I just sent her back a one-word email, and I just wrote passion.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And, intuition, intuitive thinking, sensuality is how we connect with our passion. And then we see doors. But, there's all kinds of doors. There's all kinds of levels. And, it's really, when you're driven, like if people come to you as a teacher, Tobias, and because they're driven to find an answer, that's wonderful. Sometimes my experience is that people think they have all the answers, and they're really coming to you to validate what they know. And in that case, there's nothing you can do.
Yeah, that's for sure.
but people who are really are genuine about it, for them to do this is the thing. Think about sports, right? Sports or music. What makes a great tennis player is that he or she practices all the time, right? What makes a great musician is that they rehearse and practice all the time. So if you want to have a great way of opening your mind, then eat intuitively, because you practice every day, at least once a day, without any effort.
Yes.
By using intuitive tools when you eat, you are practicing. The point is that we are so used to putting pressure on our consciousness to make changes that we don't realize how incredibly malleable. What the word that means changeable?
Yeah, yeah.
And how amazingly willing to be liberated our consciousness is, because we constantly think it's something to hem in. The fact is it's not. It's like willing to be free, but we have to give it the chance.
Yes.
And when you're sensual with the physical senses, you literally give your brain a rest. When you're, like, for example, what do you love? Ice water. We love ice water. So if you're drinking ice water and you have an ice cube and you're rolling it around on your tongue and you feel the texture of it, and your cheeks, the insides of your cheeks feel so cool, and it touches your lips, and then you spit it back in the glass. The point is the whole time you're doing that, you're not thinking about anything.
Yeah.
That is a pure moment of Zen meditation. That's really pure Zen from my perspective.
Yes.
I'm an old Zen student, That is what it is. And that frees you to do anything.
That's absolutely so true. Jane, we will be right back after this break. As usual, the music crept up on us. We'll return with Jane Bernard after this break. Thank you, Jane. And thank you very much for that very warm welcome back, JP, with the wonderful clapping. I don't know if that was the live audience or if it was just
that's all there. That's all part of Revolution Radio's return jingle.
I know it is. I'm just trying to talk myself into believing it was a live audience.
All right. Well, no, I can simulate a live audience. You can tell a really bad joke and they'll laugh at you. Oh no, hang on. I'll try again and I'll fade it up. And then we have cheers. And so let's hear it for Tobias Barrow.
With that, I will continue. Welcome back, everyone, to Journeys. I am your host, Tobias B. Harrell. Just a reminder to you that while Rebecca is away, she looks forward to connecting with you through her personal sessions, which she welcomes you to book with her as they become available. Of course, as I tell you every week, and I remind you every week, I look forward to meeting many of you as I do through my sessions and courses. You can find me at etlanguages.com. Yes, that is ET as in extraterrestrial. Remember to take a look at my course, Practical Modern Magic, as it's now enrolling for the new year, as well as many other exciting things that I've been working on, which I will talk about in the days to come. Don't hesitate to schedule a discovery call, we call them, with me if you'd like to talk to me and get some more information about any of this. Also, I know that many of you registered for the Worldwide Positive Orgone Initiative, which began recently, where you can experience the vital force of life energies for yourself in new and very exciting ways. Remember that the Chi Energy card that you first received is updated from time to time as it was recently. Also, if you were one of the first 100 people to join, you are actually eligible for the raffle being held this Thursday for a JU99 brand Chi generator, along with a remote transfer link. The retail value of this is $199, so good luck to all of you, and watch out for an email later this week telling us who the lucky winner of that is. If you have not yet joined and experienced this, you can do so easily by going to my website, again, etlanguages.com, and clicking on the photograph of pyramids in the upper right corner. You will then be guided through the simple process. And of course, Rebecca can be reached through her website, journeyswithrebecca.com. Please take a look at everything that Rebecca has to offer. Tonight I have been talking with author and spiritual teacher Jane Bernard about her latest work, Lucid Living in the Virtual Age, and how to become aware of the power of recognizing who we are and our latent ability to glean information about our reality through sensuality. Or, as Jane says, thinking with your senses and feeling with your mind. Jane, welcome back.
Oh, thank you, Tobias. It was so interesting hearing what you were talking about. I'd like to learn more about practical magic. I'll have to book a session with you.
Oh, I would enjoy that very much. It would be my pleasure. I would enjoy it.
Oh, great. I find magic is everywhere, and so that was like cool. Oh, right.
Absolutely. I always tell people that, to me, what people call magic is really just the unknown sciences that people rarely can get a chance to get their hands on and understand in a practical way. So in just like everything that you're talking about tonight, when we can wrap our minds around something, practically, then it becomes not only a real tool, but a tool for change and progress, right?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, I wanted to say something, what we were talking about before the break hit us there. It was about, you mentioned something about sports, and I don't remember exactly what it was, but it made me, or reminded me about the competition, the competitive mind. And something that comes up in my life quite often, is this competitive mind can sometimes be a block with different people, or if we resist other opinions or other information. And something that I say to people, I actually really usually enjoy it when someone will disagree with me on a topic. I love this, within reason, of course, but because it makes us, it makes us consider new ways of thinking.
Right,
it's more
makes us sharper.
Yeah, it's more than just about right or wrong. We can actually consider other thinking, and I think that's such an important aspect to become aware of sort of our, you alluded to dogmas earlier. All of these things, these preconceived notions that we have to be right all the time, or the ego and all of these things. We need to open up and just relax, don't we?
Oh, that's absolutely an understatement. We do need to relax. If you look at a coin in your hand, and, one side is head and one side is tails, you can think of that as two different sides of a discussion. But the fact is, it's the same coin. So really, competitiveness is really just, another edge on the same concept. And, when I was talking about sports, it was not about competitiveness, it was about practicing. But being competitive, I think it's good to always try to improve yourself. But I think that, when it becomes what in many cases today, competitiveness is very cutthroat. And therefore it's lost what I would consider its honor, its integrity. Like, if you go back to the Olympics in ancient Greece, for example, the whole spirit of sportsmanship was a big part of the sport. And today, sportsmanship isn't even a concept. In many cases, it's really about you go out there to win. Well, of course you're going to play to win. But but you should also play to win by playing within the rules, for example, or, in a competitive conversation, the way that you take it, where someone, you like if someone disagrees with you, well, that's because you're comfortable enough in your own thinking to listen to what they have to say. I think a lot of times the over-competitive person is right up there with a bully.
Yes, I agree. Yeah.
Meaning that they're incredibly, underneath it, insecure and unsure of themselves.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's to me, sportsmanship is the spirit of the game, and in life, it's one of the spirits of progress.
Yes, because sportsmanship is collaboration.
Yes.
And collaboration is so important, and it's so natural, and it's really what makes people happy.
Absolutely. And differences, uniquenesses. I think that I've talked about it so many times on the air. I mean, we live within a society and a world that tells us, look, you don't want to stick out. You want to be the same. You should all wear those skinny jeans, and you should all, like this type of food and walk around listening to this type of music. But really, I've always seen it in such a different light, because I think that uniqueness is really the value that we can offer the world and ourselves.
Well, I understand what you're saying, and I tend to be very comfortable in my own skin also. Mm-hmm. But a lot of people, I love how unique every person is. And I've reached the point where, like, if there, some people will wear the latest style or do something because it makes them feel good. Not because they have to, but because it makes them feel good. It's a way of being part of the group. And, I think that I personally don't believe in any hard lines except for the truth. I mean, the truth, telling the truth, not telling the truth, that's it. But in terms of social phenomena, like you're talking about, I don't really believe in judging people. I do believe that sportsmanship should be part of absolutely everything because that's part of character. Sensuality, sensual thinking is a connection with character because character is intuitive thinking. You know, character is something that takes inner strength. And, fortunately, you know, we can pull on it because it is inner. It's inside of us.
Oh, that's so true. Character takes inner strength. It is so very, very true. You know, I think uniqueness, yeah, you were saying, I mean, it depends where we are coming from rather than, you know, being pushed into a form or dogma by dogma or society, right?
Right. Well, you know, Steve Jobs has a great thing, if I can remember it properly. He said, you know, dogma is the result. Don't let yourself be ruled by dogma. Dogma is the result of other people's thinking. He goes on to say, you know, listen to your heart because your heart knows what it needs. You know, he was talking about your intuition.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's interesting because obviously, you know, we come into this world, into our lives, and we need a foundation of understanding to build upon our own senses and experience. Yet at the same time, I've often talked about the fact that we have to be careful not to allow these choices, which I sometimes refer to as synthetic choices that are put before us, to rule us. We have to really be aware that, you know, just because there's a choice in front of us and maybe an easy one to grab onto doesn't mean that it's the one we should grab onto.
That's absolutely true. And I think for that, and because there's been such a lack of that kind of information spread out, at least for the last 50 years, I mean, look at television. Television's had a huge impact. And there hasn't been much character on television.
Yes.
So, but the thing is, like, you know, I've often felt that, you know, and this is a little off topic, but that the people who make movies and run TV they didn't realize it, but they actually became like the high priests of the world. And they didn't realize and because capitalism was like the thing, and it was all about money, unfortunately they abused their power unknowingly, but they did it. I mean, I'm sure someone in there tried to speak up at some point and got squashed.
Yes.
And cause you know, like originally, theater and music were holy.
Yes.
And, I think that's, and I think that today, a lot of things that were sacred have been so distorted just because of time and culture that it's really important to do what, you know, we were talking about earlier, which is to expand our ability to sense right and wrong and to sense our needs and to be present in a way that is meaningful and helpful so that we can find new ways of doing things.
Yeah, and not just new ways, but our ways, because it's great to be able to Google, you know, this and search engine that, but I think there's such value in being able to use our own consciousness net and sort of absorb information and go out there and project our thoughts.
Well, I think that's the whole thing. I like to, sometimes when I write, you know, talk less, sense more.
Yes, exactly. Sometimes we have to get out of our own way, right? Absolutely.
Well, I think there, you know, people have, I like to talk about patience, and you should see how people squirm if you approach the topic of patience. I have had so many people saying, that's the one thing I can't deal with. I have no patience. I have no patience with myself. I cannot do this, blah, blah, blah. And, you know, patience is nothing more than self-respect. It's giving yourself breathing room. And when you give yourself breathing room, like if you're sitting in the room with someone, like, and say you're a married couple and, you know, life is full of stress. If you just are patient enough to sit quietly and breathe, just naturally, and maybe even look into each other's eyes, your evening will light up.
Yes. Yeah,
It's
it really
so
changes.
easy. It is so easy to reconnect with love because love is everywhere. And, you know, it sounds like a cliche, but it's not.
It's obviously a powerful thing because it's survived all of the craziness that this world has seen over the centuries. It's absolutely incredible.
It's magic. It's part of that practical magic.
Yes. There was, many, many years ago, I think a dear friend of mine had lost his grandmother and the thought came to my mind and, he wanted me to give him some advice or something. And I said, honestly, Mikey, honestly, love is the only thing in this world that will never go away because as far as I'm concerned, it's the only thing that's real. And that really, helped him through that. And I think, I still hold that in my heart. It's a very powerful thing that we can really use as something natural, right?
Well, it is real. It is because, you know, the thing about whatever you sense, it's very unique to you. It's completely private and you do not have to defend it. It doesn't need an explanation. And then when you trust what you sense, it brings instant connections with excitement and purpose. So many people they don't feel a sense of purpose. And they say, oh, I wish I had a sense of purpose. But they do.
Yes.
They just haven't tuned into it. Because when you tune to what you think with your senses and feel with your mind, it's your link to taking action. Because one of the things about intuition, as opposed to just sensuality, is intuition is always a call to action. It's never passive. Which is interesting because if it wasn't a call to action, it would be an emotion.
Yes. But because it's a call to passion, it's accurate.
Right. Action, passion and action, really. But like you get an intuitive nudge, you know, people, you know, get intuitive nudges all the time. And, you know, it could be so many different things. You know, I know intuition, you know, it keeps you on track with your potential, but a nudge can reset understanding. It can, as you said, inspire passion, or it can cement stability. But the real thing that I find happens when people start thinking sensually and using their intuition is they have the childlike ability to be aware of the bigger picture.
Yes. Yeah, and that's so important, childlike ability, right?
Yeah.
It changes your perspective. It reminds you of what it was what it was like when you were younger and more natural.
Right. And you know, so in a sense, intuitive thinking is the fountain of youth.
Isn't that perfect? It absolutely is. It is the fountain of youth. It is the fountain that pushes the spring of hope.
That's right. Beautifully put.
Yeah. I can't tell you how many times people actually try to convince me that I'm feeling something different than I am.
Really? What do you mean?
They do. It's just one of my pet peeves. I find if I'm conscious of, you know, what people are trying to sort of push me in certain directions at times we go through our lives. And so often that I've realized in conclusion that the people are trying to convince me that I feel something other than I actually do. And I sometimes just come right out and say, I say to them, I know what I feel. How do you think that I don't feel what I feel? It's priceless.
Yeah. So did you get any satisfaction from saying that? Does it affect them, or are they still pushy?
No, it usually stops them. It usually stops them because, I mean, it's kind of like calling someone's bluff. It's
right.
like they get this funny look on their face and like, oh yeah, well, how would I know what you feel? So it's quite obvious that they're trying to change my perception of what I feel. That's simply all it is, perception, right?
Right. But it's so interesting because that takes me right back to the beginning of our conversation when you were talking about people who, the tight jeans, everybody's wearing tight jeans. Mm-hmm. Sometimes some people, are so uncomfortable in their own skin that when a person doesn't wear the tight jeans or doesn't feel what they say they want them to feel, that it makes them doubt themselves.
Yeah. It really depends where the individual is coming from, and if they're coming from their own, in their own needs and desires. I just simply like, tight jeans, then that's great. And then if they're on the other end of that coin or other side of that coin, if they're being pushed into a form by dogma or society, maybe it's time to consider what's happening, right? It's just awareness. And like you said, some people are perfectly happy being guided by society or their own,
which is good because like when I get up, if I see somebody collecting the garbage or I see someone doing nails in a manicure parlor, I'm really happy that those people do those jobs because they're not jobs that I would do because I wouldn't be good at it, and here somebody else is doing this. So I'm really thankful. And I just, people constantly amaze me with their uniqueness. And what I've discovered is almost every person, once you talk to them enough, every person, there's a lot of little jewels. They have little gems, little unique, wonderful aspects of their moments. And, something really excites them. Something, or they do something that they love. And, a person who we might see in a role actually has a different role also in their lives. So that's part of me not knowing anything. I discover a lot.
Well, it's really nice to discover through other people. It just reminds me of something that went through my head recently. I was talking to a friend of mine a new friend of mine who works as a barista at Starbucks. And in many cases, some of us can be thinking, oh, well, that person just works in a coffee shop. How exciting can that be? What do they get out of it? But this new friend of mine explained that not only does he get support from Starbucks for his education, which is a very important thing to him, he also has this ability, this position of power in a way, because he's got access to all of these different people coming in and out every single day. And it's like access to a new information system, isn't it? You have access to people. Absolutely. Communications, thoughts, different topics, all of these things that can come up. And it's pretty easy to sort of, give a person a gentle push into talking about anything. You really just have to suggest it, and then the conversation often goes, right?
Absolutely. And I think the fact that this is an example of how the world is changing. Instead of everyone being like classified by what they do, we're starting to let people be who they are.
Yes. Oh, gosh.
That's a beautiful thing.
It's so important. I've gone too many years going out of my garage into the back alley, and my very own neighbors, I wave at them and they look the other way as if they're scared to wave. That has to stop. So it's really nice to realize that, our world is changing and people are opening up in different ways as you're describing, because it's got to be isolated. To be isolated from one another is like cutting the cable to your internet, or worse.
Yes.
It's terrible.
Well, I think the isolation that existed before the internet is the reason why I think it's the reason why a lot of the horrors of the world were able to get as bad as they are. Of course, we have a lot of horrors in our world right now that are pretty mind-boggling and the atrocities, but I have a feeling that there are always atrocities that we didn't know. So now we're starting to learn. And this is good because it's going to give us the opportunity to create change in ways that are very important. And also, I think that it's really important that people are aware of, global, realities, because I think we need to have a partnership with the earth. People always say, I'm doing this or I'm doing that. The fact is that we can learn a lot from this planet about recycling, for example.
Yes.
And, when you think, like, every time I think about the fact that all of the air and all of the water on this planet is the same air and the same water that was breathed by Moses or Jesus or Julius Caesar or Mahatma Gandhi. You realize that? Doesn't it kind of blow your mind?
Isn't it? It certainly does.
Blows
certainly
my mind.
Does. I think that another thing is just awareness is increasing of information control. Awareness of information control. We talked a few moments about television, and I think, I have no doubt that television did become a weapon of the mind, or a weapon of the mind control, because that's the way it was used by the dark magicians and the I forget what words you used there, but you had a perfect title for it. I can't think of what you called the.
I said that what I said was that I felt like the people in media, were the high priests of society.
Right, that's it, high priests.
Because over the last centuries, the people who gathered people together were the high priests.
Yes.
That's how humanity started. That's why we eventually, got separation of church and state. Originally, the state was the church, and that's one of the reasons we have so many problems with religion right now, is that it lost its role. Originally it started from a spiritual place, just like our conversation. We're coming from a very beautiful spiritual place. And I think that a lot of people are resonating with it because they have experienced, just the complete deceptions of a lot of organized religion, where they put their heart and soul into something, and it's about collecting money or something like that.
Sure.
And I think that, religion, because it was the form of government, this perspective was lost. And so, but I think that that's what happened with media. So media, when it became the central focal point, and it was uplifting. And that's why I mentioned earlier that music and theater were originally holy.
Yes.
And they were used to unite people for the greater good, and to bring people together and to solve problems. That's what it was originally all about. And then when it became commercialized, even Shakespeare, who, wasn't commercialized, but even Shakespeare there were always lessons in all of his plays. Mm-hmm. There were always, there were caricatures, but there were lessons. It just over time it became more and more superficial.
Oh yeah, there's so many levels of depth. You might call them information streams in a weird science kind of way, but absolutely. And those levels. It reminds me, talking about the churches. It's a fantastic example that I've sometimes used, where, in the past we have, talk about the fertile valleys of the Nile River in Egypt, and one of the things that I explain in my in the course that I wrote and teach is Practical Modern Magic, is the fact that the steeples on churches, the actual structure, the shape of a steeple literally pulls in a type of chi or life force energy that was then used to support the people, support the community. People would stand underneath the steeple inside the church, and they would pray. They would focus on something to manifest, and they would manifest good crops. They would manifest good health. They would pray and heal people, I believe, in the ancient past. And as you alluded to there, in many cases in this world, because of these, the fact that religion basically became a weapon of control by the wizards and high priests who know just how to use it for manipulation, they now use it for what? They don't use it to in most cases, or many cases, I will say, They don't use it for good crops and the health of the congregation or the people. They use it to control the people and make sure that they can afford the insurance on that second Mercedes-Benz they want to purchase for their wife. And it's the way it goes.
Well, that has been the way it goes, greed has a big pull on people, but I think that kindness does also, and I think that the younger generation, and I do mean like the very young ones, so many of them, I work at a school, I consult at a school, and I get to talk to the kids, and they're so peaceful and they're so beautiful, and they just have a whole different energy. I think they came in they're like from a different time or something like that.
Yes.
Seeing, hearing, and tasting, touching, and smelling, I believe, are organic ways of growing, bonding, and healing. And
yes.
When you were talking about the steeple and all of those things, prayer is a wonderful form of meditation.
Oh yeah.
It's a form of focusing on positive energy. It's a form of depending on how you pray, it's a form of letting go of your ego. And it's a form of being aware that there is a bigger picture. And I think that, we talked about that a couple times tonight and how important it is to be aware that there is a bigger picture.
Yes. Yeah, prayer is really just an intent and manifestation. And it has a power. It always fascinates me that some people don't think that a thought actually has power, but it literally has power. This is the manifestation of life and reality itself, in my understanding and experience. So absolutely, we have to use these things. And by the same token, just like we have these people that would manipulate how things work. The fact is that even some of the words or the verbiage that are used, some people feel very uncomfortable with even the word prayer, and they would feel much more comfortable with the word meditation, even though as far as I can see, it's exactly the same thing, right?
Right.
So it's important that we become aware and remain aware of these things, these tools of manipulation that some would have thrown out into the reality for us that could put us off the track. So again, just another example of how important it is to use sensuality and feel and discover for ourselves, right?
Absolutely. I think our sensuality highlights what matters, and it brings us excitement and hope by opening awareness of possibilities in the moment. And I also think that because of it keeps us aware of the big picture and the little picture at the same time, that it makes cutting through frustration easy, because when you can be clear about where you are, you know where you're headed. And, that's so helpful.
That is for certain. Absolutely. It also reminds me of the stories and the things, the times we've seen the different monks and Tibetan monks and different people of different cultures, up on the tops of the mountains in rows. And sometimes we hear stories that they've been sitting there for 3 weeks or longer and haven't moved, haven't eaten, you can barely detect their breath. And I think that what they're actually doing is what we're talking about. They're reaching out with their spirit, reaching out with their consciousness, gathering information, and then praying or meditating on what they want to create when it comes to change. I think they're manifesting.
Think so.
No?
I think I think there's probably wise men that do that.
Yeah.
I've been meditating for about 40 years, so, and, usually it's not a thought process. It's really, especially and I have been to Tibet, and, usually meditation is not a thought process. It's an opening up process of just being clearly like one with the universe. And what it may appear to an outsider to be a thought process, because when you're that clear, you see a lot. Yeah. you don't see it while you're actually meditating, you're not seeing anything. But when you come back, everything is, you see everything because you're so clear. One of my favorite stories about the Tibetan monks is they have this contest high up in the Himalayas where they and this is a true story, they take blankets and they dip them in the river, and then they put them over the monks who are meditating, and the blankets immediately freeze because, it's really cold up high, like in the Himalayas. And the contest is the first person to dry the blanket wins. And what happens when you meditate like that, your body throws off amazing amounts of heat.
Wow.
And it's quite an amazing experience.
So what you're saying is that instead of a thought process, what they're really doing is an experiencing of consciousness that allows sort of an understanding of the bigger picture when they're back. Does that make sense?
Right. Well, it makes sense. But what it is, it's not a thought process. What it is I guess I could say you sort of enter a white light, for lack of better words, but it's definitely not a thought process. It's not intellectual in any way. It's an opening up of it's just really an opening up, I guess is the best way to say it. And, because I've been meditating for so long, it's very easy for me personally to fall into it. Mm-hmm. And when I first started, when I was, 20, I, was sitting with all these people who are 40 years older than I was. And if you go into a place where people are meditating who've been sitting for a long time, even if you don't know what you're doing, you will absolutely get sucked right into it.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
And it's the easiest way to learn, of course, because that once you have the experience, it is so liberating and so joyous that you just want it. You just want it. And I was recently, I don't go to the Zen Institute that much anymore to meditate, but I was there recently, and I was sitting with someone else who'd been there for a long time, and it was so vibrant. The whole room was like vibrating.
Wow.
But there was no thinking. There was no thinking going on. Thinking it destroys meditation because thinking is the intellect.
Yes.
And meditation is holistic. And it's really, that's why breathing is so important. There was an article in the New York Times today about how, if you weren't happy, it was supposed to be 5 quick fixes for happiness. Mm. One of them was to breathe deeply in and out. And, I often tell people to do that, but the reason why breathing works is it's like intuitive eating. Breathing connects us with our body. Mm. It takes us out of our head. And one of the things that's very interesting is that every one of us carries around 10% of stale air. So every now and then I advise people to exhale twice as long as you inhale. Like if you inhale to the count of 10, you can actually exhale to the count of 20, no problem. Mm-hmm. So it's good to clean out your lungs now and then.
Definitely.
But meditation is not intellectual. And even if you chant, like for me especially, like it is, the kind of meditation I do is called Rinzai meditation, which was the old samurai meditation, and the place that I belong is like a renegade school, so there's a lot of freedom. But there's a sign over the Zendo, which is in New York, and it's written in Japanese. It says, "Don't think."
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And then, there is some chanting, but it's in Japanese and I have no idea of what it is, nor do I even care because I don't care about the words because as you say, words have power. I'm not interested in throwing around power, having power. I only chant because it completely clears my head to say words I don't know.
Oh, yes. Sometimes what we really need is to just feel or experience, right?
That's sensual thinking, isn't it?
Yeah. I love what you said. Meditation is holistic. Meditation is holistic. It's so obvious, but it's just a perfect way of putting it because it's natural, it's healing, and it has this power of influence. It's positive rather than it's like taking the difference between a holistic or natural medicine and then a synthetic one. I just like the way you put that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, life is amazing and, the answers are all in front of us and we just have to be open to them. And the way to be open to them is to choose to be open to them. It's amazing. We are really all in control of our own thoughts.
Oh, yes.
And also we are responsible for them. Just like we're responsible for our actions. So as you go about your day, if you decide that, if you're frustrated because you're not spiritual or you're whatever reason, all you have to do is say, okay, I'm changing. I'm going to open my thoughts, open my mind, and open myself to my natural spirituality, whatever that may be. And the first place to find it could be in a glass of ice water.
Yes.
And see, in the Zen writing, the old Zen writing, it's full of humor, but that is the kind of thing the Buddha would say, sitting under the tree, he would talk about a piece of ice. And the melting piece of ice would become a poem in 3 lines.
Yes.
And then it'll be gone.
Yeah. Until the next experience. Yeah. Of ice.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
That's all right. What were you going to say?
I was just going to say sometimes it's interesting because, earlier we were talking and really it's this sensuality and awareness isn't just an incoming phenomenon. It's not just that you sort of, relax and become aware and see what's coming to you. It's also an awareness of the transmission. It's what your effect on the environment and others is as well, and becoming aware of their responses, isn't it?
Oh yeah, very good point. It is. So if you're in a situation and you're noticing hostility, there's 2 things to do. The first thing is to smile. And the second thing is to, be sure you're speaking with dignity. And then when you do that, dignity is not, it's not emotional. So if a person's hostile but you're dignified, it's like Martin Luther King had dignity. It's like Gandhi had dignity. These men had no trouble and standing up to hostility in an environment because they were dignified in the way that they expressed themselves. So, and if you're with someone and you're not communicating well with them and they're trying to tell you something besides dignity, be curious. Listen harder. Listen harder. Ask questions. Curiosity, according to Socrates, is the beginning of wisdom.
Oh, yes.
So be curious. Curiosity shows respect. Say, I don't understand how you get there. Can you explain that? Instead of butting heads. You can't solve a problem always by hitting it head on. And especially if the person you're talking to and yourself are impassioned. Because then the reality is the issues are being obscured by the energy. So breathe. Have eye contact. Eye contact is so wonderful and so powerful. Even if you don't talk and just look into each other, you know, if you're good friends or something, you can say, listen, I don't understand you and you don't understand me. Let's just stand face to face. You know, you can hold hands and look into each other's eyes for a full 60 seconds. Mm-hmm. Everything will change. That's how magic works.
That is for sure. Curiosity proves that you care, doesn't it?
Yes, it's an open mind and heart and spirit that really tunes to love. But everything good tunes to love. It's such a cliche, but the longer I'm here, the more I see it everywhere. Mm-hmm. Love is the answer. It's not about, and when you talk about sensuality and love, because of the last century where there was all this Freudian input, people think you're talking about sex. Well, right. Personally, I love sex. However, I don't believe, to me, sex without love is boring. Yeah. But when you are inspired by emotion to make love, as we call it, then you reach your energies merge on so many levels. That is real sensuality. And when you love, it's not just sexual. I mean, you can love life. You can love ice water. You can love the color red. You can just love when you wake up in the morning. Personally, every day when I wake up, I'm thankful. I'm thankful I have another day to be alive. I ask to please be my highest potential and to use my time wisely, because time is all we have. It's our ride. Nobody knows when their number's up. When you wake up in the morning, if you've got a busy house with children or a spouse or whatever, if you just look at the people around you when you first wake up and connect with the fact that you love them, then your whole day will be much better. If people think they don't have time to be patient or they don't have time to be observant, and in fact, it's the opposite, because by connecting with the people you love or being patient with yourself or taking a minute to really taste your food, you are giving yourself a foundation of peace that will keep you going all day long. Inner peace is right there through your senses. And that's really the secret gold of sensual thinking.
Isn't that so perfectly true? It's interesting you're talking about waking up in the morning and being grateful, and if you're in a busy household with family and children, etc., or just as an example, how easy it is to become accustomed to it. But sometimes we don't realize the value and the blessing within it until we can't have them anymore. And so
that's always the case. But why have to be deprived to know what you have?
Exactly.
That's really sick, really.
It is. It is suffering. Understanding through suffering. I don't think it has to be that way.
Right. It's like, you want to know how good it feels to not bang your head against the wall. Just keep banging against the wall for the wall for a couple of days and see how you feel when you stop.
Exactly. Jane, before the music starts and we run out of time, I'd like to ask you to tell people where they can find your books, find you on the internet, and find you all over the place.
Oh, thank you. You can always find me at sensualthinking.com. That is my website, and my books are there, but they're also on Amazon. I've written 4 books. One is Lucid Living in the Virtual Age, which is my newest book, but it's very intense. You have it. Did you have a chance to look at it, Tobias?
Yes, I sure did, and it's just a wonderful read. I really, really enjoyed it.
So Lucid Living is a short book. It's only 100 pages long,
Mm-hmm.
and it's for somebody who's decided they're ready for change. And it's the way to do it. It teaches you how to train your brain by eating intuitively. Another book is called Fine Tuning Your Sensual Thinking, which is a simple book. You just can open it to any page for a soundbite of insight. It's the book that was on the Montel Williams show, and everybody loves it still. I wrote it at a time where, before I even knew what intuition was, I was just going through a change, and I had worked with autistic kids, and I knew the only way to get to people who were really lost was through their senses. And
Incredible.
so I was going through a really tough time in my life. And so felt like I had no passion, which was like worse than death. And so I spent every morning for an hour. I was already a professional writer. I spent every morning for an hour just writing about what I could see, hear, taste, touch, and smell. And by doing that, all of a sudden, after doing this, I realized that I had a sixth sense. Mm-hmm. And the way I think of it, I think of your 5 fingers as your 5 senses, and your palm like your intuition. The way your palm connects your fingers with your heart and your mind. And your intuition connects what you sense with your 5 senses. Actually, it coordinates them the way your palm does. For example, if you hurt your palm, you can't pick up a baby or hold a glass. And your intuition coordinates what you sense and then balances it with what you know and what you feel. And so anyway, this book I would send up when I was writing to someone, they would say, I'm thinking that I'm going through this trauma, and they would say, oh, this is exactly what I'm going through. And it's a simple book. Some pages only have a sentence on it. Anyway, that's Fine Tuning Your Sensual Thinking. And then Am I Really Hungry? I was actually asked to write by a publisher. And that's the book about intuitive eating. It's originally written from a diet perspective, but because I read all those diet books, I wrote about how to know when you're hungry, how to know when you're satisfied, how frustration works. I wrote about intuitive hedonism, which is a wonderful thing because intuition is never destructive. And in that book and in Lucid Living, I have a chapter called The Lucky Ones. And I don't know if you saw that chapter, but that's my favorite chapter. I feel that those of us in the world who have so much food that we even consider dieting are the lucky ones because there's so much hunger in the world. And the chapter called The Lucky Ones in Lucid Living and in Am I Really Hungry are all URLs that you can click on, and for nothing, for free, no charge whatsoever, you can help feed people who are hungry all over the world. There are amazing ways to help others. And one of the things I talk about in Am I Really Hungry are the different kinds of hunger: social hunger, physical hunger, emotional hunger, spiritual hunger. Well, you can take care of a lot of your emotional hunger by helping others. It's amazing how well it works. And then the other book I wrote is called Knock Your Block Off, because I also used to teach writing. And I don't really believe in writer's block. I believe writing is a process. And I used to do a lecture. Knock Your Block Off is an ebook. And it's for writer's block. It's how to use sensual thinking to beat writer's block. It's not a long book, but it is full of exercises. So my books are on Amazon. My name is Jane Bernard. I also have a blog that's extremely popular, actually, called Intuitive Scribe, all one word, .blogspot.com. I have thousands of page views every day, and I write about intuitive thinking. I write about things like transcendence, or I write about things like courage, or I write about, I can't even think about what I'm writing about. I write about, yes, he says, I write about things like, love, I write about technology a lot because I have a blog called Machines Can't Love, which is really popular because I try to have people use technology, not become used by it. And there's certain things that we can do that machines can't do, and one of them is love. And I thank you so much for this experience, Tobias. It's been a pleasure to talk to you.
Jane Bernard was absolutely wonderful. I really, really enjoyed every minute, and I thank you so very, very much. I would love to get together with you again sometime.
Well, I want to learn about practical magic.
Good. I will see you there. Thank you again, Jane. Thank you to everybody for listening, and I will see you again next week. What a wonderful show.
Thank you.